In the early 1830s, the Oxford Canal decided to speed their traffic up. They had many loops that followed the contours of the canal as Brindley had originally designed it. Now with better techniques, it was possible to cut through hills and create larger embankments. So much of the old canal is bendy and much of the new canal is straight. However, at this point, we have a long straight. So that means it's new, right? Well, actually, it was Brindley's solution to a problem. There was a wide valley and there was no easy way around it. So he effectively built an aqueduct. It's known colloquially as the Brinklow Arches. It was a brick arch structure, very much like this pictured. This picture was created by a German artist who wanted to show what was possible to German canal builders, and this is an AI representation of what it may have looked like when it was new. However, this isn't a perfect representation. The canal was only one boat wide and the river and the path went through the same arch. Looking at the contours for the area, it's not exactly clear why Brindley chose this route over keeping with the contour. However, at Stretton there is a large hall called Newbold Revel that may have limited the availability of this route, so this was the next easiest route to take. Some improvements did happen to the arches. It was widened, and with that, one side of the canal was filled in with an embankment. This is why it has the slopey sides that are indicative of new sections. In later years, the arches were filled in nearly completely. Once the embankment reached the 305-foot contour again, the canal took a sharp corner and continued towards the village of Brinklow. The towpath bridge that was put in place because this branch was kept operational to serve the village was one of 8 such iron bridges on the canal from Horsley Ironworks in Tipton. Only 7 now exist, and of them 7, 5 were used on old arms. It's been wet recently, so there's still a lot of water in the bottom of this canal. It's normally a bit drier than this. However, you can see the remains of an old bridge where the parapets have been knocked off or removed. And further down the arm, there is the remains of at least 2 old boats, one of them being the FMC steamer Earl. The canal crossed the Lutterworth Road on a long gone bridge and went around the back of the houses. The route crosses where there is now a sports field, however there's no sign of where it used to be. And where it used to cross the road further down, you can just about see where the plots of land have used the canal land to squeeze in some buildings. It used to come through where there is now this driveway for this old farmhouse. On the corner here. I really must thank Barry Cox and his wife for their help in finding the original route, and even allowed me through their home into the back garden so I could see for myself. Oh yeah, yeah.
Inside that corner there's the water.
It used to continue with a big S-bend before going under a bridge which has now been removed and continuing along this stretch. This stretch has been kept in water because it's used for fishing, and it gives you the best appreciation of what the original canal must have looked like back in its working day. This stretch has been cut off from the main canal since the 1830s works. It crosses over Rugby Road and eventually aligns with the path of Calf Iron Road, where it runs alongside it for a while, not actually wanting to cross it. Strangely, even though there's only a real small dip in the height of the land, the canal seems to then make a random, at right angles, detour to the road, goes all the way back to the contour line, does a short run, then another sharp right-hand bend to come back onto the original line. The wooden piling seems to be where the original line connected back to the canal at a slight angle, so the corner wouldn't have been all that sharp, but it still would have been quite a corner. It then continues through Old Oaks Wood in a straight line following Calf Iron Road. The next loop heads towards the railway and just crosses some fields. There's nothing left of it that can be seen really. However, it crosses the cutting at a right angle, and an arm was originally kept to feed a lime works near the farm. This is Brinklow Marina, and as part of the planning permissions, they made the old line into a nature reserve. A lot of these old arms only exist because they provided access to wharf and facilities that were still needed. The line works was just before this farm, and the canal continued to the right and followed across the field, joining back at the end of the straight. Moving along the canal, canal. We come under an original bridge and along a reasonably straight stretch where a later railway crossed, and we find our next loop has been partially used by a boatyard. This loop wasn't originally in water and therefore didn't have the iron towpath bridge. It basically does a loop through these fields and provides the border for one of them before heading back north to cross a small stream at Paul's Bridge. It's here just after the wharf that we find our next loop, and this is the start of quite a big loop. It was in water for a long while and originally fed a limeworks. It does sport this wonderful cast iron bridge made in Horsley Ironworks in Tipton. It remained in operation for much longer than a lot of them due to a couple of factors. One being this spill weir here, although I don't know if it wasn't built after it was cut short, but it looks like it's an older structure. We'll have a look at the second reason shortly. The canal winds around to follow the contour. If you can see in the fields the course of the canal. The farmer wanted to get rid of the canal because his animals kept falling in it, and as you can see it passes quite near the railway, and it was actually used to feed water troughs on the railway so that passing trains could fill up with water without stopping. However, once steam trains stopped running along this stretch, the farmer was able to close and fill in the canal. However, there's still quite a few bits remaining of the canal, this old canal bridge that can be clearly seen, which serves as a crossing for a private road. And this right-of-way footpath bridge, which presumably would have been originally a swing bridge, but I think was always just a footpath bridge. Then the limeworks itself has a large basin with brick walls, and at the end it widens out enough to turn a boat. Originally the canal used to continue a bit further, came through where these bushes are now, and you can still follow the dip of the canal along the edge of this field. There are some bits where the paths have been built up. Originally, where the footpath crosses just further up here near the church was actually a footbridge. And as you follow it along, you reach this tunnel. It's right next to the church in Newbold, and while it only remains for bats, at least you can still see inside it, but it has been blocked up because it did collapse, and that's why there is a slight indent in the church lawn. It used to cross the road and come back out into the open. This 1795 drawing shows the canal and the tunnel as it enters underneath the church graveyard. The canal used to come out somewhere around here, and following along the course of the canal you can see why these buildings are at an unusual angle to the canal or in any of the roads in the area. There used to be stables and a pub, and the canal used to run along the front of these buildings, and join back up to its original course just before the bridge. This cutting and its tunnel cuts out quite a loop, but as you can see it was a huge undertaking, and because the traffic was so large, built it with towpaths both sides, which was more than the original tunnel and would have to have been legged through. We end this video here, but we will continue further along the canal into Rugby and look at some of the interesting loops that have been cut off. Please like and subscribe, and if you like this sort of content and you wish to help me make more, please buy me a coffee, and I'll see you in the next video.